Good evening. Welcome to our webinar hosted by the San Mateo County Dental Society. It looks like we have a big audience joining us today. My name is Ben Yon, and I am your president of San Mateo County Dental Society. Before we get started, I want to review how we will be running this meeting. All participants will be placed on mute. Our presenter will provide a presentation on preserving your practice. During the presentation, you may post a question in the question and answer box. For those participants on your desktop, the question and answer box is located on the bottom of your screen. For those on an iPad or iPhone, the question and answer box should be on the upper right. Please feel free to post your questions, and if time permits, we're going to go over those. And I've already talked to our presenter tonight, and he really wants to go over questions and answers, so please post those as we get going. We're very pleased to have this very experienced presenter with us today. His name is Bernie Stoltz, and Bernie is the CEO of Fortune Management, the nation's leading and largest accredited postgraduate practice management program. He brings over 30 years of business leadership to the dental industry, including conducting thousands of seminars across the globe. His passion is helping dentists become their professional and personal best. Please welcome Bernie Stoltz. Thank you.
Well,
Bernie, take it away.
Good evening, Ben. Thanks for having me tonight. It's my pleasure. You know, I was telling Ben before we went live, I will always have a warm spot in my heart for San Mateo. I was raised in Burlingame, California, and we still enjoy lots of wonderful clients there. And so when the opportunity arose to be able to contribute to the San Mateo Dental Society, it's absolutely my pleasure. And so let's jump into it a little bit. As Ben told you, Fortune Management is a national leader in practice management. We have now at this point about 120 advisors in about 80 major markets in the United States. And at any given time, about 1,000 dental practices under management. And it's funny, from the time COVID hit about mid-March, it seems like we have been busier than we've ever been and needed more than we've ever been needed. And so that makes me feel good to be able to contribute, and especially to private practitioner dentistry all around the country. So tonight, I really want to do a couple things with you guys. I wanted to give you as much value in a short amount of time. So one of the things I think I'd be remiss would be to not talk to you a little bit about your recovery program and post-COVID-19 and how it's left really the state of dentistry and some things that probably you want to make sure you have in place. So we want to help you to do that. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of transition into the future of dentistry and some things that we should all be aware of that's happening in dentistry, but also what you can do to preserve private practitioner dentistry. It's one of my passionate subjects, so passionate that I released my latest book that I released late last year. Is called The Win-Win Outcome, and it was really dedicated to the preservation of private practitioner dentistry, and really has to. It's going to come full circle, and even quicker now than it was. One of the things I said in week 1 of our 12-week recovery program, and just so you know, we just delivered this week 11. Of 12 weeks of a practice recovery program. And what I said in week 1 was a little bit about any crisis that we may have in our lives or in the world, such as this. And I said, first of all, crisis, any type of crisis will make the human being or the organization more of what they already were. And what does that mean? What it means, it's a magnifying glass. It means that if you were a caring, loving, great leader of your practice, before this started, it means you probably became a better leader. It means you probably became more caring towards your team and your patients, and more of that. And, unfortunately, if you were other than that before this started, maybe more of a dictator, or someone who lived in scarcity mentality instead of abundance, or wasn't necessarily happy before this started, then unfortunately it might have made you more of who you already were as well. So crisis is a magnifying glass. The other thing I would say is that crisis accelerates change. And that's really, really important in the field of dentistry, because it was already evolving. It was already changing. And so what this will do is this will evolve it even quicker. So with that being said, let's advance to the first slide, and we'll just keep popping through these slides. And one of the things I said, oh, and by the way, as we get into this, I want to make sure you know, I'm not alone here tonight with Fortune. We've also got our two lead coaches for San Francisco and San Mateo County, Mr. Ron Indek and Mr. Eric Capral. So if there is any other follow-up, or there's going to be a couple gifts that we're going to give to you tonight. One is, we're going to send in every participant that is on here tonight, we're going to give you a copy of my latest book. So a lot about the preservation of private practitioner dentistry. It's called The Win-Win Outcome. So we'll make sure that those get out to every participant. And then also a gift certificate for an analysis if you need further support. One of the things that we are really proud of is this 12-week recovery program. It was something that we started the week that dentistry got shut down, which was 11 weeks ago. And we will conclude with the 12th weekly podcast next week. But these two other coaches that are on the line tonight, if you need any of those resources, they're going to be there for you. The slide that's up on your screen here was one that we asked every one of our dentists in the country to really put on these three hats the moment that really the shutdown occurred. And we said, look, you need to, and especially now while your practices were shut down, and I'm hoping that I'm talking in the past tense. I understand there may still be some practices that may still be closed. I hope that's not the case, but I would give you, just if you're looking for where the timeline is, I would say that and I'm going to talk on a national level here. On a national level, we had probably 75% of our practices reopened in some form or fashion around May 4th. But it was kind of a trickle effect. There were many more by the middle of May, and by the end of May and beginning of June, I think we're at 100% that we've got people open now. And it just depended on really where that doctor was emotionally, and also if, I said there were always three things that were going to dictate your reopening. It was, did you have patients that wanted to be seen? Do you have employees that were willing to come back? And did you have the proper amount of PPE? So those were things. But I hope that during your time down, one of the things that I've always said is that nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning you decide to give it. And when the shutdown occurred, one of the things we all as human beings had a choice to do was decide what we were going to do with this and what was going to be great about it. I know from my own personal standpoint, I looked at it as maybe one of the single greatest opportunities in my life where I could refocus on just being a better me, maybe working on some projects that I had put aside. And maybe for a lot of you, it was reevaluating your core values in life. I know from my standpoint, what I saw became much, much more valuable was my family, my health, friends, things like that, and the betterment of myself, a little bit more personal development. And those were opportunities that I hope that we all took, as opposed to just taking a doom and gloom approach. The key was to stay optimistic, and it still is today, because dentistry is not all the way back. And so what we said right out of the gates, we said, really consider yourself three things in your practice. First of all, you got to be a leader. One of the things we know in any time of crisis, it requires good leaders, and leaders have to be optimistic. There's no room for pessimism. Pessimism does not promote creativity, leadership, and optimism do. So there were some things we asked all of our doctors to do as leaders. We also said, look, from a financial standpoint, you really have to put that CEO hat on. And from a third dimension, you had to put your clinical director hat on. And these were things that really should have occurred 11 weeks ago. And there should have been an ongoing set of decisions being made. I've talked to so many doctors around the country, and there was a huge spectrum of emotions, but also a huge spectrum of behaviors from some people who were working more than they had ever worked on working on their business and how to get back open and how to prepare for the future. And then there were some that just were honest with me and said, hey, I just checked out. I didn't do anything for the first 4 weeks, and whatever it was for you is fine. But let's talk a little bit about these three hats. Next frame. This was a Chinese symbol that we used in every one of our 12-week recovery podcasts. And it's really a Chinese symbol for crisis. Now, the interesting about it is that it's really two symbols within the concept of crisis. It's risk and opportunity. And so I think that's very apropos for where we are in the comeback of dentistry. There are going to be some risks. There were risks from day one when you were shut down, but now it's time to focus on the opportunities. Next frame. Next frame. So one of the things we know was unprecedented uncertainty. That was where the call for leadership was. Continue, advance, continue. This is all kind of one message, which is, it was important, I think, that the message as a leader you gave to your team was a really extraordinary response, maybe something that said, look, steady hands are on the wheel. We will come back from this, and we are planning our reopening as we speak. And I think as you guys are opening and are open now, what it's really going to require is agility. And I'll get into some of those concepts of what we call at Fortune agility. Next frame. And this was just a little bit of, all of the messages, all the things that were typically going through a doctor's head. Ben and I were talking before we went live tonight about, where was, what the role of the ADA was, what the role of the CDA was, what the role of the CDC was, and, unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately, there were a lot of messages coming from a lot of places. Whether it be the good advice you got from your dental society, but a lot of you were listening to your CPAs, you were listening to your attorneys, some of you are with practice management advisors like Fortune. And so, our role in this was to make sure that we had a clear-cut, concise message. And I think there was a time a few weeks ago when you really needed to stand guard to the doorway to your mind. And I still think a lot of that's going on. I don't think the press is your friend right now. I think I just saw an article just 2 days ago that they said that on a scale of 1 to 10, dentistry was still a level 4 as far as risk factor. So I don't think our media and our press is doing dentistry any favors. If I had my wish, here would be the one thing I'd love to see. Well, two things I'd love to see the ADA and CDA do. Number one, definitely secure you guys enough PPE. Second of all, make sure that they lobby with the insurance companies to pay for that PPE as an adjunct charge. And the third thing I think they should do is invest in some public service announcements that can go on in prime time that say, look, dentistry's safe. You need to see your dentist, and we're open, alive, and well. Come see us. And I think that those are the things I would expect. But again, many, many voices, many, many points of view. Next frame. One of the things, let's talk about getting dentistry back. A few years ago, Simon Sinek, I'm a big fan of his work. He's a great author. He talked in his book about the power of why, and he talked about early adapters. Whenever there's any kind of innovation or change or re-innovation, there is always going to be the early adapters. And what I'm likening this to is kind of a metaphor to your patient base now. A lot of our doctors and practices have reported over the last 30 days that they're really, really busy, and that their hygiene is already to capacity, and that they're busy. I had one practice here in the Silicon Valley had a record month in the month of May. So just so you know, folks, where that's coming from your early adopter patient base. These are the ones who were always your best patients. These were the ones who really trusted you the most. They accepted treatment the most. They were your best referral bases. And the caution that I give you is that there's going to be a chasm. There's also another great book out called Crossing the Chasm. And, you know, in any business, in any profession, in any industry, if you're going to be massively successful, and dentistry has to cross this chasm now, in my humble opinion. Crossing the chasm now means is how do we not just get the early adapters back into your office, but how do we get the early majority back? And that's what's going to really, really be the difference between you running into cash flow issues in the third and fourth quarter of this year, or how busy you ultimately are, and can you bring it back all the way? Because here's what you also have to be real about, is that there will be a late majority. There's going to be people who will wait and put off going back to you and scheduling hygiene appointments until the latest possible time. And then, of course, you have to also factor, in my opinion, for what we call the laggards. And the laggards are, in any profession, in any innovation, they're the last on board. These are the people that were the last people to get an iPhone. They were the last people to get rid of their AOL account. And they will be the last ones. And you got to remember, in the laggards, you've got, as it applies to COVID-19, you've got a lot of senior citizens. You got a lot of people who are still scared to death to leave their house. So you have to account for those things. And so I'm going to give you a few ways that we're coaching our practices around the country to do that. Next frame. Yeah, so one of the things that we want you all to be, and this should have really, in a perfect scenario, we wanted you to be the center of influence for dentistry starting 11 weeks ago. And I'll give you some ways of how that occurs. It's really about communication to the community, to the patient base. Next frame. So one of the things that we teach at Fortune, and for Fortune doctors tonight, they'll understand this is a PowerPoint frame on what we call sourcing and accountability, which is, it's a coaching model. It's how we teach our doctors to lead and not to micromanage, and to empower certain people on their teams. We've created a special post-COVID-19 edition of that, and that's what this is. So our advice to you is that as you go back to full capacity of employees, that you do give them some new accountabilities. We believe there should be a clinical source person. There should be an OSHA and compliance source person. There should be a business and financial source person. I'll speak more about that. There's got to be a marketing source person. It is really important right now that we turn our marketing engines back on. There's got to be a human resource source person, and huge emphasis right now has got to be on scheduling, reactivation, and most important, reactivating the hygiene department. If you are a general dentist or even a perio or pedo office, you have got to be looking out over the next 6 months and making sure that you're getting that hygiene department, which is the lifeblood of your practice, back to capacity, because there's no way that the restorative part of the practice will recover unless we first get that hygiene department back up where it needs to be. Next slide, please. So one of the things I'm overemphasizing marketing. And so I thought maybe I would just give you maybe 8 things. Most of these things are things that you were doing pre-COVID. But I think there's some emphasis and maybe some additional things you may want to consider right now. One thing is just to make sure you've got a culture collaboration inside the practice with your team, making sure that you've really worked with your team on scripting and how to make reactivation calls, how to engage with patients. And of course, we created, I think, a 17-page patient communication guide to go along with a 15-page safety checklist. So if you don't have those kind of resources, get a hold of one of our organization. We're happy to share. But I think also, if you've got patient communication systems like Revenue Well or Solution Reach or whatever, really important that you turn those on to full capacity through email, texting. I think the more personal phone calls that the dentists themselves can make to reach out to their patient base, the better off they would be. And I don't think it's necessarily about calling them and saying, hey, I'm back to work, I'm open, if you have any emergencies. I think the best thing that any of our doctors can do today is to just do some TLC calls and ask that patient how this has affected them, how they're feeling. I think empathy is a huge tool right now that every dental practice in America needs to use. Making sure that you know what they went through, how they're feeling, and how did it make them feel, and what's still on their mind, and what concerns do they have. So I think there's got to be an additional push and personalization from the doctors. Depends on where you're at in your practice. And then, of course, even direct mail. Direct mail in most parts of the country for us was passe over the last few years. This is probably one of the only times over the next 6 months when I'm really going to be an advocate of potentially doing some direct mail and other kind of advertising, maybe even some local advertising, as well as whatever you can do to enhance your website. So I think all in all, communication has to be at an all-time high. And this is not a time for a practice or a dentist to sit there in reaction mode. It's time to be proactive. Next slide, please. So I just put some things out that I think are going to be different in a new normal that you need to have team meetings about. Now, these were always relevant even before COVID, but I think they're even more relevant now. And that is, let's make sure that you've done a great dress rehearsal, dressed in all your PPE, but make sure that you're taking a look at what is that first impression when a patient, are you having them wait in the car, or are they spaced in the reception area? How are you doing with that? What is the first impression? Hopefully it's not a scary impression. Hopefully it's one, and I would tell you, I think every practice has got to have somebody in that practice who is the chief fun officer, who's trying to put some levity to it, who's making this thing fun. Take a look at the impression you're making on your patients with the physical space, Um, Also, have you adopted teledentistry and making more doctor calls? How are you utilizing technology? There's certain pieces of technology that are going to really, really serve you post-COVID. One of them, of course, would be CEREC. If you're a CEREC single visit practice, you've got a competitive advantage, because one of the things we know is that patients are not going to want to come to the dentist as many times. So if you do bring them back and you can show them a way to get all their dentistry done same day dentistry or with one visit, that's going to be a selling feature. Another one, we have a lot of our doctors around the country and practices who use Solea lasers today. Well, Soleas are well-documented lasers that cut down on the infectious spray and the aerosols that are out there. So if you had that, you should be really communicating the use of that as well. I think it's really important, no lonely patients right now, making sure that every patient, while they're there, has an advocate there, anticipate their needs. Remember what the platinum rule is. Everyone talks about the golden rule, which is to treat people the way you would want to be treated. The platinum rule goes one step beyond. The platinum rule says, treat people the way they want to be treated. And the only way you're going to find that out is by good, effective telephone calls before they come in for their visit coming back from COVID. One of the things that I have said for years, one of my definitions of success is find out what people want, how they want it, and then fill the needs quickly and elegantly. You're going to find that patients are going to want certain things on how they want to be treated. They're going to have certain perceptions. I mean, some are going to be, just fearless as can be, and you've already experienced a lot of them. But there's going to be others who will come later in this recovery process who are going to be far more fearful, and they're going to need a little bit more TLC. The other thing I would say is make sure that the last impression, what is the last communication and the last smile or laugh as they go back to their car after this visit. So I think now is the time when you've got to over communicate, but also I think over service. So I gave you some tips there. Next slide, please. Also, this has been for years what we call at Fortune our ultimate success formula. It's really 5 steps. I think this should be really a set of guidelines for every team meeting that you're having with your team right now. And that means know your outcome, know your powerful why, take massive action, monitor the results you're getting. And right now, that's really, really important. I think you all know the outcome of why you need to get back and why you need to bring your practice to full recovery. But it's also important as you as leaders, as dentists, are willing to remind your patients of their powerful why and where you guys are in the healthcare community, and that you can't sit on the sidelines. And also then take massive action. Most of you have done that already. That means doing all the things that you needed to do to physically as well as emotionally, as well as on the communication side, to get that practice in the shape to receive guests. And then this is where I think everyone's got to have a high sensory acuity, is right now in these first few weeks that you've been back. A lot of you just came back as late as the beginning of June. Well, look, you are still feeling your way. It is important that you monitor the results and the responses of the patients. What are the comments? What are the things that they're saying? What are the questions they're asking? And you as a leader, you've got to monitor the results and the questions and the behavior of your team as well. But then based on that, be willing to change your approach. So don't get too stuck in a game plan that you thought was going to be how this new normal was going to be, and not be open to changing your approach, especially over this next 4 to 8 weeks. I think you should be very, very fluid in your decision-making processes. Next slide, please. Now, this is something that we have sent the message out to every one of our 110 advisors and ultimately to every one of our clients. And that is to change your goals and change your expectations for the year 2020. In other words, at the beginning of this year, we took every one of our practices in the country through what we do every year, which is an annual planning process. And in that, we recalibrate our philosophy every year. But more to the point, we put together a business plan with a pro forma, with a set of goals, the amount of days worked, what we're going to produce, what we're going to collect. And so every one of our doctors, and probably most of you, started the year with a set of goals. And a lot of those were based on growth and based on what your top line productivity and collections would be. And that really, for the most part, went right out the window with this gap of anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. Now, there is still an opportunity here. And this is where we say risk versus opportunity. One of the things that we will be coaching on starting now and all the way through the rest of this year is not necessarily on getting you back to top line productivity, because we hope by the fourth quarter you are there, but there's a good possibility that you may not get back to 2019 goals. So what do you need to do? You need to focus and put your barometers more on profitability. What does that mean? Well, there are some opportunities that your practices will have now. First of all, hopefully you all got your PPP money. Hopefully a lot of you are on it and also applied for EIDL money, which I think we advised all our doctors whenever they could get it, take the EIDL money because it's 30-year money at 3.75%. So most of our practices took both. That in itself was an opportunity. And now, especially with Congress rewriting the PPP, where you now have 24 weeks and now only 60% of it has to be spent on payroll, that's a huge gift. And this was another argument why you needed to really be careful of who you were listening to in those first 4 to 8 weeks, because every accounting firm and every law firm thought they had it figured out. Well, yeah, they had it figured out until they didn't. So now we kind of know that in most cases, that PPP money should be a total forgiveness if you're handling it correctly, which will evolve into profitability there. So you've got that on your side, but also, you may not have all of your team back yet. One of the things that we're advising all of our practices, you have to have the mindset almost like a startup. So Fortune has a whole division within our national company that's all about putting young dentists into practice and building new de novo practices around the country, or building something new from scratch with no patients. Well, in some regards, even if you've been in business for 20 or 30 years, you have to take somewhat of that mentality. In other words, if you were a startup, you wouldn't just bring 8 people in as employees if you didn't have work for them. You wouldn't be able to afford it. You'd go broke before you even accomplished what you wanted to do. So really, really got to be smart. I think you have an opportunity here. There's going to be some employees who maybe are at an at-risk age who are not comfortable coming back yet. You may have some other people who have decided that they don't have proper child care, or that they're comfortable sitting on unemployment. Those could be opportunities for you, because probably your patient base isn't all the way back yet. Your flow isn't all the way back yet. So again, there are ways to manage your line item expenses right now so that you are profitable ASAP. And so, that's a huge conversation. I'm not going to dwell on it tonight, but all I would say is through the rest of this year, focus on your cash flow, focus on profitability, so that you have a stable practice, so that when it is all the way back, you can reassert your top line goals. My honest opinion is that annual planning 2021 is where your major growth and setting your records for growth will occur. But for this year, let's focus on profitability, not productivity. Next slide, please. Also, this is something I thought we'd throw in tonight just to remind you, there's 3 ways to grow your practice back to profitability and back to growth. There's always been these 3. You either grow it with more patients or just growing your patient base, or by frequency, meaning, through your hygiene department, you have your patient base coming in more times per year. And then of course, the third way is more per visit. Let's go to the next slide, elaborate a little bit more. Here's what we know. This is just plain old simple math. If we can, even under normal circumstances, if we can take a practice, and this is really one of Fortune's methodologies that we teach all over the country, whether it's a startup or a new client, we want to show you how to at least grow your new patient or your patient base by 10% year over year. We also want you to increase the amount of times you see your patient base by at least 10%. You can do that through, you do the first silo, obviously, of more patients by marketing, advertising, referrals, on and on and on, all the ways that we would always do that. I think there's a little different tweak to it right now. But then also to frequency. And the way you're going to do that is, and I said this earlier, I want to reiterate, high level of focus on your hygiene schedules right now. You have to remember that when you shut down about the middle of March, you had probably a full schedule of hygiene through the month of March and April and even into May if you weren't able to open up in May. So the conversation now is how did you handle those appointments? Because if you were on a 6-month or 4-month recall basis or 3-month recall basis, you also had existing patients on the schedule when you did return come May or even now in June and into July. So it's going to be really, really important that you maintain your frequency and make sure that all those patients who were missed or were shot over during COVID-19 are put back as quickly as possible. You got to filter those back into the next 6 months of your hygiene schedule. And then of course, the third way you grow a business is by being worth more per visit. And there's some simple ways. Scheduling to goal methodology is one that's going to be more important now than ever. And it's interesting, when we brought people back originally, we for the most part extended our hygiene appointments to 70-minute appointments and cut down on the amount of patients we'd see in a hygiene column during a day. Although we're seeing that our teams have been really resilient and are almost to a point, after just 4 or 5 weeks back, that they're ready to condense back to 8 appointments and 60-minute appointments. But I think overall, part of growing your business is going to be to be able to offer more services, to be able to do one single visit dentistry. So there's a lot there. And this formula doesn't just work post-COVID-19. This has always worked. I've taught this principle for 20 years. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's shift our heads a little bit. I'm going to transition post-COVID-19 and maybe what you're doing individually as a recovery method to really what's going to go on here in the profession. And I don't have a crystal ball, as nobody does, but let's call this an educated guess of 30 years in this business. And here's what my instincts and my intuition tell me. They tell me that coming back from this, there's always going to be the top 20 to 30% of your profession. These are the well-run practices, the profitable practices, the ones that were enjoying the zone of maximization before this all hit, who will be fine. they'll be fine because they've got good teams, they've got good culture. More than likely, the doctors were good leaders, and probably they were at the pinnacle of their careers. But my instincts tell me that there is a bottom 20 to 30% of the profession that is really going to struggle long term, and some that may not come back at all. Some examples of that would be, and we're seeing these real life stories already. We're seeing the 60, 65-year-old dentists, or just let's call late career dentists, who are not comfortable about even coming back. And it's a double-edged sword, because not only are they not willing to put the energy into what it's going to take to recover, but then it's also the fear factor of, are they really physically capable to do it? But the other problem is that it's not a practice that's really sellable at this current stage. To give you some insider facts, the practice solutions banks, large and small, whether it be the Bank of America's and Wells Fargo's or even the small community banks, none of them have opened up their lending channels. And most of them are telling me that the criteria is they won't even look at funding a loan on an acquisition until we've got 8 weeks of those doors being open and being able to see what kind of numbers that practice is coming back to. So consequently, the practice brokers are kind of in a stalled position as well. And there's going to be some tough times for, again, late career, or if they just were struggling before this started. If they were struggling before, remember what I said, crisis is a magnifying glass. And if they're struggling or teetering or not profitable before, there's a good chance it got even worse. And the opportunity here that I'll talk to you guys about, and it's what my book was based on, is where are the solutions? I'm never about pointing out problems. I'm always about solutions. And the solution is, how do we create a win-win for some of these practices that were struggling before and will continue to struggle? And there's all kinds of different versions of struggle, right? Like maybe the facility needs updating. Maybe they're on a month-to-month lease. Maybe the landlord did not cooperate during COVID-19. There's a plethora of reasons why struggling practice may have gotten even worse. So what I wanted to do tonight was at least give some solutions on what we're doing around the country. And because one thing you have to admit is that whether 10 or 20 or 30% of this profession in your area decides or can't recover, the patients aren't going to go away. Those patient bases have to go somewhere. So there's some ways to create win-win. Next slide, please. So this is just to reinforce what I just said. I've spoke about this for years. It's in my book, and that is the 10 life stages of a business. Now, this, if you look at this is also the 10 stages of a human being, from the birth as a baby all the way through its death. But also any business has the same life cycle as well. And a dental practice falls under that as well. If we are putting a young, dentist into a brand new startup de novo, then obviously they've given birth. And as they progress through, our job together with them is to create a journey which takes them through infancy to toddler to teenager to young adult until we can get them to maturity. Maturity in your practices means that you're what I call the zone of maximization. That means you're as productive and as profitable as you can be. And then the key is to keep it there as long as possible and to even create new arcs of growth. Because if you don't, then you end up potentially in that bottom 10 to 20 or 30% of these practices that could be in jeopardy right now because they might be in midlife crisis, or they might be aging, or even worse, institutionalization. Institutionalization, by the way, of a dental practice means that the dentist is no longer profitable, and quite frankly, they are putting money into the business just to keep the doors open. It's on artificial life support, and ultimately it dies. There's a death there. So what we want to do, and one of the messages, tonight, I think there's something for everybody here. First of all, on one side of it, if you are a young adult or at the zone of maturity, then I think that you should be the ones who can be a solution to the people on the other side of the mountain, whether that be midlife. By the way, I think midlife crisis dentists can be resuscitated and brought back to maturity. I think there's some steps that have to happen, and we do that all the time. But I think as the facilities age and capital and expenditures are not able to be made, and they fall into some of those 8, 9, and 10 categories, that's a problem if we don't have solutions for them. And again, this has just been magnified over the next few months. So I think one of the messages that I would send to everybody watching tonight is do a self-assessment of where are you in those stages. If you're 1 through 6, then quite frankly, you're on one side of the equation that I'll talk about. If you're 7 through 10, you may be on the other side of the equation. And we want to be able to create, as the name of my book is, a win-win for both sides. Next frame, please. So one of the things that we did during post-COVID as a kind of a way to support every dental community, not just to support our internal national network of doctors, but really to every community. So tonight, great example, we've got the San Mateo Dental Society. So here's one of the things that we believe should be at least explored in every market in America. And that is, let's first of all decide in your market, are you a candidate who still wants to grow through mergers and acquisitions? And could you create some opportunities for some mid to late career or some aging practices in your community or in your dental society where you could elongate their careers and maybe show them how to be more profitable and maybe even have a tax-deferred liquidity event over 3 to 5 years? So one of the things we had all of our members do during COVID-19 was to send out letters. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of our doctors are sending letters to some of you right now in your market. And really what the letter will say is it'll say something like, doctor, what if we could show you a way to continue to practice in a better state-of-the-art facility, joined by a well-cultured team with really best practices, scenario practice management, and also maybe show you how to continue to practice on your own patients, but no longer have to worry about the overhead, no longer have to worry about the management. And oh yeah, and what if we could create a 3 to 5 year tax deferred liquidity event for you and make these last 3 to 5 years of your career maybe the most profitable, and go out a winner and not the alternative of that. So there's a whole set of criteria there. And one of the things that I want to invite is that at the end of this call or over the next week or two, if you are on either side of this, if you are someone who has a great facility who could grow and could bring on associates, or if you are someone who is looking at solutions post-COVID-19 and looking for transition planning, and don't think right now that you would have a good time of selling it outright, contact us confidentially. We will help you do an assessment of where you're at and we would love to play matchmaker on this. Because, and by the way, if you read my book, here's the name of the game. The name of the game is economy of scale. And I said something at the beginning of this broadcast. I said, look, crisis accelerates change. Well, change was already happening in dentistry. The days of the multi-specialty practice are already upon us. The days of the DSO are already upon us. And, you know, whether we love or hate DSOs or management service organizations, the reality of it is they have done a lot of things right. One of the things they've done right is they've been able to attract the investment community, the private equity and venture capital, because, you know, pre-COVID-19, a well-run practice or well-run DSO was dropping 20 points or more of EBITDA to the bottom line. Well, if you're a private equity investor and you're looking for cash to invest in a financial climate where interest rates and banks aren't paying you much, then you parking large amounts of cash in a profession that can give you 20% year over year cash on cash return, and also leave it parked in a tax-free growth environment, that's a really nice offer. And that's what DSOs have done. And that's what has spurred a lot of the growth, that and the fact that a lot of young dentists have not wanted to go into private practitioner dentistry. They've got tons of student loans, and they felt that at least at the beginning of their career, they're going to go work for a DSO. But I want to give the DSOs credit, but it's nothing you can't recreate. But here's some things. Remember, I said something earlier. I said, definition of success. Find out what your consumer, in this case, your dental consumer, wants, how they want it, and then fill the need quickly and elegantly. DSOs, for the most part, have been able to accomplish that. What do we know the consumers want? Well, we know that they want multi-specialty under one roof. We know that they want beautiful state-of-the-art facilities. We know they want to see state-of-the-art technology. They want to see a really, really well communicating team. They want to see a well-paid team of professionals. They want convenient hours. More and more, they want 6 day a week. They want evening hours. We know the easiest hygiene appointments in America to sell these days is between 5, 6, and 7 o'clock at night. We've got more and more practices that are doing modular shifting. So the profession was already going in that direction. And the point I make is that single practitioners cannot supply all of those things. They can, now a single owner with multiple associates can do it, but the bottom line is a single practitioner cannot. And it's not realistic anymore to ask a single practitioner to invest $500,000 in a CEREC, a cone beam, and a high-tech laser, which are all consumer-driven products these days, spend $500,000 and then only be able to use it 32 to 40 hours a week. It's not cost efficient. It's not economical. So the reasons for bringing practices together, bringing practitioners together, it's self-evident. Because one of the gifts that dentistry has today, if they take advantage of it, if private practitioners take advantage of it, is to come together and practice under one roof. Because I'll give you just some simple math on this. If we take $1 million practice and we take another $1 million practice, and let's talk about what the average practitioner, I'll use some national statistics. This may not be you, but these are the national statistics. A single practitioner in this country has an average top line of a little over $800,000 a year, with a operating overhead of 72%, which means they're dropping 28% to the bottom line. The problem with that is that includes the dentist having to be a wet-fingered dentist. So the reality of it is I could make an argument that they could sell their practice, go to work for a DSO, get paid 35% of collectible production and make more money and not even have to have any financial risk of owning a business. So the single practitioner, not a real profitable model. And even if you are really, really on top of your game and you don't have any long-term debt and you've really ran the thing lean and mean, maybe you can get down to 50% operating costs. But the challenge is it's impossible to grow that way. Now, if we took $1 million practice and we took another $1 million practice and we moved them together under one roof to create one great facility, one well-paid team with the right technology, the ability to give more hours to the consumer, and to maybe even bring multi-specialty under that roof, I'll make an argument that about 40 to 50 cents of every dollar of that second million drops to the bottom line in a shared environment. So economy of scale, it's self-evident. It's where the future is going. I say in my book, I said this last year, I said really dentistry is going down 3 paths. There's obviously the DSO path we talked about. On the other side of that spectrum, there is the boutique single practitioner who will continue to have erosion of profitability, and expenses will continue to go higher. Marketing costs will continue to go higher, and not necessarily a bright, shiny future. And then I think there's this third path that we're talking about, which is for you guys to join forces and to be able to know that 1 and 1 can equal 3 if you do it right with the right strategies. So let me go on. Next slide. There's all kinds of ways to do this. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here. We can address this with behind the curtain one-on-one conversations, depending on where you are. But, there's lots of ways for associates to become owners, whether it's, buying in as an owner with a new bank loan or installment sale or sweat equity or a shadow account. But, if you are already an owner and you're looking for ways to bring associates from associate to someone who's got skin in the game as an owner, that's not a bad way to go. And we have certainly lots of different plans that we can show you how to do that. That's just one concept. Next slide, please. This week, my team threw this in, but very, very important today. Pain plus reflection equals what I call progress, or even better, evolution. And, I think this profession has just gone through about anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks of pain. I think it gave you all probably, I hope, some time to reflect. But I think the question now for all of us in dentistry is, what are we going to do? How are we going to evolve? And how are we going to make progress? And how are we going to be better than we were before? So that's just kind of a challenge that I put out there to everybody joining us tonight. Next frame. This is the gift certificate. These are the 2 gifts that we're going to give you tonight, if you want them. One is a copy of the book, The Win-Win Outcome, which really talks all about solutions. And there's a lot of things there I didn't touch on. So there's obviously associates becoming partners, but what I didn't talk about are mergers and acquisitions, shared partnerships. I mean, there's lots of ways for let's say that there's $2 million practitioners on the line here tonight, and they both continue to want to still be owners. There's a way to bring you under a partnership environment where you keep your corporations alive, but you both can enjoy economy of scale with shared facilities, things like that. There's also, again, I think right now, as I spoke about, there's definitely a need to create a path for the late career doctors to be able to put a maybe 3 to 5 year exit strategy, or maybe an immediate cash walkaway sale in place as an alternative to saying, I give up, I surrender, here's the white flag, let me call a practice broker and I'm done. That will not serve you well in the end, not right now at least, because first of all, I don't think the brokers have the buyers for those older facilities, and it's costly, and I think you end up with pennies on the dollar for a whole lifetime of work you've done. So there's great alternatives to that. So again, one of the things that's available to every one of you is a gift certificate. I believe Ron and Eric are on the panel here tonight, and what they would be in charge of doing would be to go in and really just do an assessment of your current practice and also where are you at, talk to you a little bit about your vision of where you want to go, whether that's you growing through mergers and acquisitions and economy of scale and some of the new concepts that we're using around the country, or are you one that is looking for more of a wind down or exit strategy, or maybe that you just want to recover from COVID-19 and get back to full health. So those are available to you. They can, they're not going to chase you down. You've got to make that request. But what we will send to you unsolicited is we will send to you a copy of my book, because it spells out a ton of different strategies on really how to preserve private practitioner dentistry. It's not a hard read. You can probably get through it in a couple of days. I'd highly recommend you arm yourself with that. Is there another slide behind this? This is just kind of the final slide that I finish all my live lectures, as well as what I've been doing lately, a lot of Zoom, which is really the law of attraction, which just says that you get what you focus on in life. And never so true has it been over the last 60 to 90 days that you as a dentist have got to make sure that you're clear about where your focus is, and to pay attention to where you're putting your energy and your focus, and where you want to go, so that you attract the right things back into your career, into your practice, into your team, into your life. So that is probably the final message. And I think that we are in good shape, Ben, where if there are any questions, or if we want to have any Q&A, I'm totally committed to staying on this thing and making sure everybody's needs are served. I hope it was a timely and informative presentation.
Yeah, we have one question by Maria Bautista. Is it the right time to buy or acquire a practice from a retiring dentist?
Absolutely it is, if the conditions are correct. So in other words, I would need to know more about Maria. In other words, does Maria already have an existing practice, or is she an associate looking to go into ownership for the first time? Because there's a, can she chat back to you on that?
She could, if she'd like.
Maybe she doesn't want to, but let me just answer it both ways, Maria. And that is, if you're an associate who is looking to go off into private practitioner, you're looking to do an acquisition, what we call
PSA. Existing practice.
She already has an existing?
Yes.
Well, then yeah, it's exactly what I spoke about, which is, if there are late career practitioners with what I would call subpar facilities, this is a great time to look for acquisitions to accelerate the growth of your own practice. So this is, and by the way, I want to be cautious the way I say this. Here's what I don't want any of our dentists to do. I don't want you to be predatory, because there is going to be some doctors out there who are really going through a rough time right now. And I think there's empathy. And that's one of my motivations for doing this tonight, was to say, look, if you are the late career dentist and you're really struggling, and maybe you're not even open even now today as we speak, I want you to know that there are resources like us here that can help you to find maybe someone like Maria to acquire. And I know I have in our own system in San Mateo County, I've got practitioners who have beautiful facilities, who are equipped to take on, other patient bases and bring other doctors under their roof.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. If we have any other questions, we'll field those via Facebook. But right at this moment, we don't have any more. So I want to thank you so much, Bernie. Yeah, that's it. So we really appreciate you.
Well, you are absolutely welcome. And, again, I wanted to do something that I thought was thought-provoking, but was also timely for you guys. And to know that dentistry will come back. It'll come back all the way. It's going to look a little different. And, there may be, some repositioning or repurposing of some of these offices. And I believe this is an appropriate time for if it's appropriate for you, it's appropriate to make sure that you do look at, are there ways for you to come together and not be that solo practitioner? That's my focal point there.
Do the participants here have a way to ask questions in private?
Yeah, let me give you a couple of things. Number one is our national website. So it is fortunemgmt.com. fortunemgmt.com. Anybody who wants any inquiries, and Fortune is a large company that has lots of laterals, whether you're a young dentist or you're looking for financial planning or transition planning or practice management. I mean, I would invite all of you to go and take a look at Fortune as a resource. The nice thing about Fortune is that we are California based and we're the largest in the United States. So you have us right in your backyard. But also, if you go to that website, there's lots of different contact phone numbers there and email addresses, predominantly for our local coaches in San Francisco and San Mateo. They're on that website, so you can go directly to them with any requests. And then, like I said, we'll try to get a book out to everybody who is on this attendee list.
All right, excellent. All right, well, thank you for everyone for joining us. We hope you found this helpful. This meeting was recorded and it'll be posted on the SMCDS Facebook page. So thank you again, Bernie and Fortune Management. And we want to thank the SMCDS staff for doing an excellent job of putting this together. And everybody stay safe and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yes, it's been a pleasure, and have a great time building your business back to where it needs to be, and the best of luck to all of you. Mahalo.
Thank you.